what kind of comps are you willing to play at this point, or do you tend to lean towards? Um,
If there's an early Syndra, just go Syndra. Otherwise, uh, Kog'Maw, Kassadin, or like a fast 8 into Karma Fiora. Like that's unless there's like a hero augment or some other, I don't know, asymmetry on like augment selection or something. But it seems like those are the main paths right now.
okay, then. So why did you choose to sit on Treasure Army here?
Uh, Castfest seems like it just helps karma even more because you're rolling. Well, I guess a lot of it is you're not really rolling. I'm trying to decrease. I don't like playing karma or not karma, Syndra that much, especially if someone else is hitting Syndra. So I don't want to like give the Syndras that much more of an advantage. Champion Conference also feels like it helps Syndra a lot because you could just hit your like vanguards or shapeshifters earlier. I guess if you're like going, I don't know, vertical, like you get an augment that lets you go vertical portal or eldritch, like that would be good. So I think I sat on Treasure Army more so just to avoid the Syndra lottery or help Syndra players more.
Okay, that makes sense to me because when you said your comps, you basically said a lot of reroll. So I would have assumed you should sit on Castfest here because Castfest basically helps people who can buy charms in stage 3, and if you're playing reroll and it costs you less to go to buy a charm, you can buy like you can hit all the like super good outs on stage 3, like Assembly is the huge one obviously, and then like Dupe, small Nico, and basically all the combat charms. You can just click a charm every round. So Castfest is very like when you listed your comps, I was like, you should always be sitting on Castfest here, right? Because it benefits anyone who can roll and buy charms earlier. But yeah, so I mean, with your logic, you since you don't want to benefit the Syndra players, this makes total sense.
Okay, so part of it depends on my assessment of the meta and how I feel like how I'm playing might differ. Because if other people are playing reroll less than me, I should definitely sit on Castfest. But if I feel like other people are playing as much as me, if not more than me, then I should avoid Castfest.
Yeah, I mean, also, as you said, I kind of if you think you have an edge in this lobby, I think Treasure Armory in general is the best thing to stand on. Because as you said, it kind of disincentivizes Syndra, especially it double disincentivizes Syndra because it's not Castfest, which is good for Syndra, and it's not Champion Conference, which is kind of neutral but a little good for Syndra in my opinion. And then Treasure Armory is actually bad for Syndra because usually you want to get 3 items on your Lord and your Syndra, and you don't like you can itemize your Karma, but usually it'll be Karma 1, Nami 1, so the extra items aren't as good. And especially if you run into like Radiant Treasure Armory or like some of the more high roll Treasure Armories, they kind of benefit like fast 8 boards a lot more because you tend to have more units to itemize. Versus Syndra is primarily just a Syndra and Mordekaiser show.
Right.
So I think with your assessment, it actually makes perfect sense here to sit on Treasure Armory.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I think
I probably hold the Nomzi with the Shyvana.
Well, I mean, we can see what you do, and then you can kind of
Okay.
Okay. So if you didn't get gold, you said you would hold Nomzi with the Shyvana.
Yeah. Just to get the burn.
Yeah, it's probably a mistake. I think Dragon is not actually a real trait. On stage 2. It's generally like a trait that's better on. It's basically a trait that you only play on like stage 5 once you're playing around like Smolder and you play Shyvana and you get the free burn. That's like the main use case of Dragon. And burn just tends to be weaker early in the game. The reason Sunfire and Morello are strong is because they do a lot of damage, not actually because of like the burn portion of it until later into the game. So it's not as great. Also, Witchcraft is very, very strong early because it's a flat health decrease, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
150 flat health. So if you think about it as in your Zoe spell deals 150 more damage, that sounds very strong on stage 2, and it is. Like, the best opener in the game is 3 portal plus Poppy frontline for Witchcraft. And yeah, so I think I would hold Poppy there if you don't see gold. And I like that you didn't sell the Shiv to buy out your shop, because the shop was units that you're not really going to play around, versus Shiv with 2 shapeshifter you could.
So here I'd roll first 2 and keep Pandora's, especially if my range of comps is most likely reroll. I guess here I could slam BT with Cassidin, but the glove, I guess glove could be QSS, but at least right now I don't really have any direction.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pandora's also kind of benefits from the meta right now being so heavily focused around tier and bow, where Pandora's kind of actually allows you to play win streak more successfully, because you're not really gated by the tiers and bows, which you can see in the AVP. Like, the AVP for all the Pandoras is much better than it is like the end of last set in most sets, due to the fact that basically bow and tier are so contested that Pandora's allows you to not really be kind of chained down by your lack of these items, because everyone's just taking them off carousel.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I always struggle in these situations to whether to buy the charm. I guess I want to keep the Zoe, like all the portals, since that seems to be my best board right now, and that can like screw me over if it transforms one of them. I guess I have another Zoe in shop, so that's why I bought all the other ones, because basically I just don't want the Jace to get transformed.
Yeah, I agree with your play here, and I agree with your assessment of it. I think the only times I don't click this, because I mean, EV wise, it's probably slightly positive, although like you get punished very hard for transforming Jace here. It's just not that likely to happen. So I think you have to play the odds here with a bunch of 1 costs. Also, like, the main times I would avoid it is if you had like a Zoe 2. You pretty much can't actually get like that many. Like, you get a Syndra 2, but there aren't that many 2-star 2 costs that you'd actually rather have than a Zoe 2, especially since you already have Portal. So that's like the only sort of scenario. Like, if you had a Jace 2 or a Zoe 2, like, if you just have a strong 2-star 1 cost, I would kind of avoid taking it. Otherwise, like, as you're doing here, buy out your shop and kind of pray it hits on one of the units that isn't that important to you, and it's like 1 gold.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, this goes back to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you kind of recognize the mistake that it's like you should just be playing Portal here.
Yeah, I should be holding Zoe pair.
Yeah. This is actually a classic. When I came back to the game, I started like I was like reading really hard, and Replay watched me play, and he got like so mad at me. He was like, "Why are you making I just made 10 and like sold all my pairs," and he was like, "Your spot is completely doomed. Like, you just can't play the game from here." And he was basically right, where like you kind of sell off all your direction and pairs on 2-1. It's like, if you never made 10 on 2-1, you would probably do a lot better than if you were making 10 like as often as you probably are. Like, this is a very, very bad making 10 here.
Right.
Like, you kill your direction. If you play like a board that wins 1 round, like if you won this round, it's the same value as making 10, right? Gold wise, and you get more HP. And as I said, you don't actually need pick prio because you have Pandora. So there's like infinity reasons why this is just a bad sell. I'm sure you kind of realize that, and also like on 2-1, pretty much like no brainer should always just play strongest.
Right.
Actually, in the exception of having a Syndra, you don't always have to play strongest, but outside of like this sort of fringe case, kind of just having the heuristic of always just playing your pure strongest board, you can't really go wrong. So yeah, obviously you should just play Portal plus Elise for Shapeshifter and not Mate 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Portal should definitely be better. Hopefully I found that.
I don't think you're gonna find that, but yeah. I mean, as I said, like it's a lot easier to kind of see it on someone else's board. Like if you're, I mean, obviously as you're reviewing now, like you probably see that, oh, I should have been playing Portal these 2 rounds, but like in the game, that's not the case. And I think you kind of just purely focus, like don't think about econ at all. Just focus on playing your strongest board only on stage 2. You can do this. I think this is generally good for you, like as a practice, but you can also do it as an exercise where, like, specifically for you seem far too greedy, and I would just like don't think about econ at all and kind of just only play for your strongest board and see kind of where that gets you. Because basically you just 3-loss for fun, right? Like there's no reason you should be 3-loss here. You probably lose this fight, right? Because he's Portal with like Keepers and Jace 2, but you should have been on 2 win before that, which would be better gold wise, because you would have got 3 gold instead of well, at this point you've gotten 2 gold total, because you got 1 for 2 streak and 1 for 3 streak. If you won your first 2 rounds, you would have already gotten 3 gold. 1 for the 2 streak and then 1 for winning each of the rounds. So you're basically worse off in every fashion for making the gold here. You're technically up 1 gold because you made 2 extra interest. But like you basically have to hard commit to cast in here. Like you kill all your outs. You kind of have to commit to 5 loss, which isn't great. Yeah, basically it's just like way too greedy, and you should lean towards the being too safe as opposed to too greedy. If anything, so sort of like force yourself to play too safe, and then kind of check back with yourself in maybe 2 or 3 weeks and see. You can kind of reassess whether you're playing too safe now. But like, if I were you, I would just force myself to go much safer than I think I need to be, and see how that kind of works out for you.
Okay, because that's a very common spot I find myself in. So yeah, I think the 2 points that you made is focus on stronger support first, and then just doing this exercise more on my own games. I think both should probably help me a lot. Yeah. All right. So here I have an open bow on Kassadin. I can either go for a 3 cost, though I think I'm at exactly 20 gold, so I don't think it helps me. Oh, actually,
it does actually.
It does.
I'm presuming you're not going to level, because your mindset here is you're definitely thinking about 5 loss. Right. Like you're in this mindset, you're always thinking about 5 loss. Having said that, 2 cost also gets you to 30 gold, right? Because you get 5 plus 2 plus 1, and then plus 2. So it doesn't really matter in that sense. But since you are sacking, I think from the spot that you are in now, I would just take like I would probably take the Bo Nico to deny it, and then if someone takes that, I would probably take the Chain Wukong to deny it, and sort of continue sacking. Having said that, I would never be in this spot, right? But since you're already in this spot, and like I think the best play from here is to sort of just take highest gold, as you don't really care that much about slamming. I mean, you care a bit about getting your items, but not like it's not as crucial because you're on 3 loss.
Right. Okay. So if I did want to try to win, I'd probably get the Rod to get Guinsu. Yeah. Which you just is good on Kassadin, and okay, still leaves me open to Syndra.
And I will say on 3 loss here, if you actually have upgrades on your board, like say you had a Jax 2, I would be a lot more willing to take Rod here and try and 2 win. Because 3 loss, 2 win is better than 5 loss. Basically, anything like you in generally on stage 2, you always want to try and win like rounds as opposed to committing to 5 loss when you don't have to. And that's like a heuristic I noticed with like a lot of people that I've kind of coached and taught, where like I think a lot of it has to do with like streamers and like watching maybe too much soju, where they kind of commit to like 5 loss when in spots where they don't have to. And the reality is it's almost never worth it, just because it kind of screws up the rest of your game. Besides, like 5 loss, you will have slightly more gold, right? But you will actually have to spend that gold to make a board versus if you 3-loss into 2-win, it's very likely that you're like holding all your pairs and holding the units and holding the upgrades so that you don't actually have to spend as much gold to stabilize. And most of the time you'll come out like net neutral gold wise, or maybe a little net negative, but you save the HP and also the, like in general, just the gold for winning rounds is something that people don't account for enough, in my opinion. Where like 2-win, if you're winning the rounds, right, you get 1 gold for each of the wins, and then the 2-win streak is 1 gold on the Krugs.
Mm-hmm.
But 5-loss is only 2 gold now, so it's even worse. So like essentially you're only down 1 gold streak wise for winning these last 2 versus losing these last 2. Obviously you'll probably lose a little bit more from interest, but you make up a little bit with like being able to hold your pairs and being able to save the extra HP.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
But in this specific spot, I think I would commit to 5 loss here just because you have no upgrades.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I like taking the bow Nico here. I think you kind of hovered like the Syndras and the people who wanted bow, so I think that kind of shows that you were thinking about like denying it. Also, I think I would just level here.
Oh, okay.
I think it's acceptable to not level. Chain Slam is also very weird to me. I mean, obviously you want Eon is like what you're thinking, right? But like if you're gonna hold these units, you should just slam Chain on a. Okay, I guess you sold
on a bench unit.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously you sold to make 30, so it's not as important.
I guess I could have slammed it on Jace because Jace isn't really doing much.
Yeah, because it's like generally better. Having said that, I guess you have a remover, so it's not that bad. But I also think I like leveling once you hit the Caston too.
Okay.
That's kind of a scout thing, but I think you fought strongest in the lobby, and from the like brief scouting you did on Carousel, there were a lot of people who are pretty much open, and Portal plus multi here is a very strong board, especially with Caston 2, and I think it's very, very likely you just get to 2 streak. And it's basically a disaster here if you win this round or if you lose this round.
Right. So I should not have sold I think I had a Zoe, right?
Yeah, you had a Zoe, so especially after you win the round, I don't think I would make money here. I mean, even holding the Nico pair is not even bad, right? Because you're playing Jace on your board. You hit a Nico 2, you can play it for like a few rounds and kind of probably get rid of it on 3-2.
Okay, so this goes back to what you were just saying about focus on strongest board first. I'm playing way too greedy, especially if I'm like in a position to streak.
I mean, another thing is I think it's very unlikely that you're actually doing the math in your head here of how much gold you're gaining versus losing for like these decisions. Just because if you kind of actually do the math, you usually realize that it tends to be relatively nonsensical to like commit to losing or to sell there to make 10, because you literally made 1 gold, but this round itself is worth 3 gold, right? Because it's worth 1 for winning, and then you get 1 for streak, and then you get 1 for streak on Krugs. So like the potential loss there is just the math just doesn't line up to be able to sell and make 30 there.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. As far as the vest slam, like is your issue mainly that I put it on Cassidon as the mistake, or is it that I wanted to hold the vest in the first place?
It's that you slammed it on Cassidon. I think holding vest is, I wouldn't hold the vest to be honest, but I think it's like acceptable. Also, if you're willing to slam Titans to streak, and then because due to the fact that you have a remover, I would kind of be willing to like slam some less optimal chain items. Like I would be willing to slam Sunfire Caston as well. So I don't think it's like that crazy to hold chain, because your other items like weren't that amazing to hold to make streak items. Having said that, I think you generally want to hold it on a different unit as like a general rule of thumb. Obviously here it's hard to get punished because if you get a slammable item, you can just slam it on something on your bench. But like on Krugs, for example, if you get full item anvil, or an item anvil or Priz orb, or say you don't slam an item and you have this chain on your Caston, and then you get a full BT, and you slam the BT and then you have BT Rageblade chain, if you get like if your Pandora's turns into like a full QSS or a full item that you want to send on your casting, you don't have the extra slot, and you kind of have to burn the remover for free. Having said that, it's a little bit less bad because you have the remover. So like it's slightly stronger to slam the channel on casting, and then you have the remover, so you can't really get punished. But if you didn't have the remover, I think this would be like a pretty bad blunder.
Okay. As far as like item goes, I'm basically looking for like Crown Guard or Edge of Night.
Yeah.
And then I probably want to hold this cloak as well, right? For BT, or are you just trying to...
I would hold the cloak. BT QSS are both good. This actually would have been a great spot for the Marcel P. Like, see if you can full sell here, because this is like a fight you always lose. On this board, I actually think Portal probably wins this fight, so I think you did get punished for selling Zoe, because this is a much weaker board. But like, assuming it doesn't make a diff, you should actually just sell Syndra and sell Jace here, because if you win, you make 40. And this is assuming that like you will lose all your fights and the Syndra doesn't make the difference. And then here, like, you kind of get punished for having the chain on Castan, right? Because I think normally you would... Actually, maybe you wouldn't slam Sunfire here even if the chain wasn't on cast, because you're kind of just green for Castan items. So maybe it's not a punish. Right, Eon seems fine to me. All threes is an interesting take. I don't know if I would click all threes there. Because basically you're paying your... It's like if you rerolled your shop, but you can only see threes, right? Because it costs you 2 gold. So it's like if you click D, but you could only see threes. But the thing is, I would argue that's worse than an average shop roll for you.
Because you're looking for 2 costs. Like I was thinking, I could find Hecarim or what's the other guy?
Shen. You already have Hecarim is the main reason, and the likelihood of you hitting 2 Hecarims is very low. And Shen doesn't actually spike your board at all, because you can't. Right. I mean, it spikes your board next turn, right? But you can't. It doesn't spike your board this turn. And then like also you can't hit the 1 costs, which are very important in the comp. So I would argue that all threes is worse on average, because your shop odds are basically only 1 cost, 2 costs, and 3 costs. And of those, the 3 costs are probably the least important to your board, because you have 1 Hecarim. You have no Shen, but not having Shen, like, Shen is the best unit you can play on this board, but it's not like a huge upgrade over... I mean, it is a pretty big upgrade over Nunu, actually, but it's not as huge of an upgrade compared to like a Jax 2 or an Ashe 2 or an Akali 2 or even like you would rather have a single Castan probably than a Shen. So I don't think I would have clicked it there. Okay. And for most of those shops, it's like you kind of just have to think through it. Like, is a shop of 5 3 costs better than, whatever my average shop odds say I should get, which is like, 3 2 costs, 1 3 costs, and 1 1 costs, or whatever they actually are. That's not exactly it, but you kind of have to get the idea in your head of like, is this better or worse than my average shop reroll?
Right. Okay. Here, Misconnection seems pretty good since I don't have Jax or Ashe 2, and then the Blistering Strikes could be okay. Because you don't really have a great anti-heal holder, right? Like, you could put Sunfire on like Hecarim or like a red buff on Ashe that you move to Callista later.
Yeah, I think I agree with your assessment. I think Misconnections is probably slightly better here due to the fact that you don't have the 1 cost. I believe you have a Jax pair. I mean, we'll see later, but if you have a Jax pair, it's kind of like a slam dunk Misconnection spot here compared to Blistering, because it sort of allows you to not roll, or roll a little less. Like you could probably still roll 50 and buy like useful charms, because it just gives you the Jax 2 on the spot, which is a humongous upgrade, and then it gives you the extra gold, which is like, it's all right. Like Misconnections is 14 gold, so like even if you like if you get some upgrades out of it, usually Misconnections is a pretty good option. And specifically here, Jax 2 is just such a big upgrade that I think I would click it.
Okay.
the other thing to consider is like in your head, the argument for blistering strikes would be more towards like if you're planning to roll very like you think you're gonna roll deep anyways, blistering can make more sense here because you're like gambling that you will probably hit the jacks, and so like the value of misconnections goes down.
Right.
So like that's kind of what you're like. If you take misconnections, you're not rolling very much, and if you take blistering, you're rolling until you sort of hit some upgrades.
Mm-hmm.
Those are like the two lines that I think make sense here. I mean, featherweights is kind of a slam, like very, very, very good argument in this comp. So I think at this point it's probably just featherweights.
Yeah, I think I was thinking the same thing. I believe.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Probably would roll once here for something to put on my board on a streak. I mean, one streak. I think this is kind of like another maybe greed too much thing. Obviously, you didn't really scout, so I don't know. Maybe this is another you win all your fights angle. Somehow I don't
no,
think
I didn't
that's
scout.
the case probably. But
so I think this is the same as 2-1 where I was like, oh, 3 portals strongest board. I think I'm actually just too slow. Like I'm spending too much time at certain decision points and not enough time in other decision points, which maybe is just a practice thing, or like or maybe I need to be more conscious about like how much time I'm allocating to each phase of the decision making.
Another thing could be like I would assume like overuse of stats is actually a thing that kind of got me in trouble with this. Where I would check like the stats of things that I kind of intuitively know are not really great and like not really options in my head, but I was like, oh, let me check the stats just in case. And then I would kind of start to run low on time and make like mistakes where I'm not playing my strongest board, or I didn't roll when I'm supposed to, or I didn't roll as much as I could because I ran out of time. And like it's a little bit of a practice thing and a little bit of like a conscious decision to spend more time like playing your board and kind of not relying so heavily on stats. Like obviously you should check stats for like 2 close augments, but you should have like a good idea of like what you're not going to click in the spot and not really have to check stats that much. I would assume based on how much time it takes you to choose augment, that's somewhat likely to be happening here, but obviously I don't know. You said portal is strongest board here? I don't think.
Or no, portal that was 2-1.
Oh yeah, 2-1. Yeah, because I was gonna say I think 5 multi is better than portal most of the time here.
Yeah.
And this is a big fight win. To be honest, I wasn't sure you would win that fight. But it's good. It's good that you did. There's actually a very, very large charm diff, so I'm glad you actually chose to buy the charm there.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that I bought that because I could have made econ if I won and didn't buy the charm.
I'm also surprised you bought that. I'm kind of glad you did because I think that's like a very correct decision. I mean, minor wish is just very, very good. Like value wise, if you get econ, you're happy. If you get combat, you're happy on a 2 streak. Because again, like the 3 streak is worth 2 gold plus whatever health you save, right? Mm-hmm. So, like the math into it just makes a lot of sense. You take Hecarim 2. I mean, seems good to me. Notice you're being contested.
Yeah, 2 ways. Well, okay, so there's one way for sure. And one guy is Jax 2, but I guess he probably understands that he's not going to be able to take on 2 cast 2 players.
Okay. I think I'll just wait and see. Okay, I think I would Arcana Hecarim here. In general, because it's 15 AP. The durability is actually like pretty useful, and I think I would Arcana Hecarim and slam the TG. I think you're greeding too much for the BT on your cast-in, where it's like you're on a 3 streak, you have a Hecarim 2 on your board with no items and 5 multi-striker, which is like your Hecarim 2 is very, very strong on this stage, right? Or should be very strong, and you have an open TG. Like I think with Pandora's, you kind of just have to be willing to slam like the items to streak.
Okay.
And I think that is the difference between 5 streaking here. I think Hecarim 2 would have won with TG would have won that fight. Obviously, actually, I think pretty much any TG roll probably wins you the fight. Like even whatever you imagine the worst TG roll is, it's still 200 health, 20% crit, and you would give your Hecarim the Arcana for the 10 AD and durability. I think that's
Okay. I didn't even realize that Hecarim gives you durability. I thought it was just AD.
that's a bit of a reading gap, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the bigger issue is more that you didn't slam the TG.
Mhm.
TG just tends to be very good in these comps where you have like a lot of like units and the trade is very strong. Like in Duelist last set, just because like your random two cost and 3 costs always tend to be very strong with those items mid game.
Yeah.
Yeah, TG is just like a great slam there. And usually you don't have other, especially when you don't have like any units that are actually that strong to itemize afterwards. Like Akali's not that good of a unit, so you're not really like too greedy for items until you kind of get to like Camille and Callista who want items. And at that point, TG is also great because you can just TG or Camille. Yeah, basically in these like melee like high vertical trait like attack speed or attack damage comps where you play like basically like 6 melee dudes and they all have like the same trait that gives them a bunch of stats, TG just tends to perform very well.
Mm-hmm. It'd be like putting TG on Volibear last set.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, you just get a lot of value out of the item, especially when you have like the extra items to make the TG basically.
Mm-hmm. So here, given that I selected featherweights, I was struggling to figure out whether I wanted to actually stick around at level 6 to keep rolling for Kassadin 3 or just push levels and then maybe consider switching over to Fiora or even just sticking with Kassadin, but then like having a what we'll call it, the 4-cost multi-striker Callista backline, yeah. Which I think if I'm sticking around at level 6, I'd probably take Radiant versus like something else if I'm trying to push levels.
So one decision that I think is another kind of mistake if you're kind of stuck at that crossroads is I don't think you should roll at 4-1 if you're kind of between that, because your augment changes your decision a lot. Because there are, like you can hit Priz Ticket here, which would you just take Priz Ticket and roll down on 6, right? Or you can hit like multi-striker +1, which allows you to kind of try and play for Callista, and then you don't need a Camille, so you can kind of spike on like level 7 on 1 Callista and build like a stable board. So I think usually if you're in like that sort of decision crossroads, specifically for like reroll comps that you can tempo, you don't really want to roll on 4-1, especially because your board was already pretty much upgraded, right? You had Kassadin 2, Akali 2, Hecarim 2, Ashe 2. So you didn't really roll for much or upgrade much. You kind of hit like extra copies on your bench, which doesn't actually do anything for your current board. Versus right. Even if you're not at that crossroads, it's still kind of like subtle because you do get punished for hitting ticket, but that's less of a like a lot less of an error if you're just committed to rerolling.
Which I think is where I headed, but yeah, I guess even before that, like if I'm, what's your take on, let's say towards the end of stage 3, like whether to not necessarily to commit, but generally which direction to head in?
In previous sets, it's pretty much always push. I would say this set is you're a lot more willing to stay 6 and just reroll because they increase the bag size by a lot to 25, so it's a lot more feasible for both people to hit. Having said that, there was another Kassadin 2 in your lobby as well, so 25 bag size, right? If you both hit and the other guy still has a Kassadin 2, that's 21 out of 25, so it's like for everyone who has a cast on their board, it's a little less feasible, and it's pretty nuanced and like scouting based. I would say in your specific spot, I would probably choose to push because you have you're basically like full board upgraded without having that many extra copies of anything that kind of incentivizes you to roll there, where you're like very far from spiking if you're rolling for Kassadin 3 versus pushing levels.
Okay. So basically, the idea behind pushing would decrease my upside, but like decrease my variance and probably give me a higher average placement. Whereas rolling for Castellan 3 like gives me a lot higher bot 4 chance with like maybe slightly higher win percentage chance, but like overall like the EV is just not worth.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment pretty much. Something that will also change it is the guy who's contesting you is 77. If the guy contesting you is 32, you're a lot more likely to be willing to play it because he's a lot more likely to die, and then you can just kind of get get away with it. But because you are both healthy, it makes a lot of sense here to push. If you're also low HP, that's when it makes sense to roll as well, because your outs are kind of cut down. Like if you get to the level 8 board, your HP is likely too low to bleed into a 4th, and you'll probably just bleed into a 7th anyways. So because of that, like your only out is kind of just sending it and sending like the 30% prayer that you hit cast in 3 out of nowhere, right? Versus since you are 73, you have a much better spot to push than if you were 32.
Okay. That makes sense.
Having said that, I would always take Radiant here over these other two options.
Okay. Radiant Refractor, right? Over the other one?
Refractor.
Just because, okay, yeah.
It's like strongest on your board, and I'm not sure this is just like a pure stats check pretty much. If you're thinking about like pushing completely, you could actually take Rageblade,
right?
Because you would assume Rageblade is better on your Callista, and you can kind of remove it and play around Callista later, but you decide not to do that, which I think is also fine. Definitely a Radiant Edge of Night diff. You don't have a Charm this turn, which is a mistake. I don't remember if that was like you were taking too long, but
yeah, I was definitely taking too long.
All of these reroll comps, when you're like at this sort of HP and well, not HP, but like when you're streaking, you should always have a combat charm on stage 4 and stage 5. Like that's another very easy heuristic. On stage 4, it's less true for like fast 8 because charms can be pretty expensive. But like if you're on a streak, you're playing reroll, you should always have a combat charm, or at least like a strong econ charm on stage 4. And on stage 5, you should just always have a charm. Just because like it's what you basically roll once for the option to get a charm every turn, and yeah, unless you're like full 0 gold, 1 life, you should always have a charm every turn.
Okay. Also, Shen should be stronger than Karma here.
Yeah, I like Shen. Just move red to Ash. I think you kind of got caught up in thinking about how strong of an item holder Karma is compared to Ash. But the reality is you don't actually really need anti-heal on their backline that much, right? If you think about how the comp works, unless your Akali's getting there, which your Akali 2 is kind of worthless anyways, so it's not really getting to the backline. And so like the red buff hitting the units that you're casting hitting is completely fine. Like you don't really need the Karma.
Okay.
Also, when you chose to slam items, I would have slammed them on Hecarim, because I think even with featherweights, Hecarim is probably stronger.
Okay.
I mean, again, that one's just nuance. I don't know whether you could argue that that's not a mistake, because you could argue with featherweights Akali is stronger, and I think that's a fair argument. But like me personally, I would assume Hecarim is still stronger, because I think Akali is a very weak unit. And so if in your head you think it's stronger on Akali, that's completely fine. But I think there's also a chance that you're kind of autopilot putting it on Akali, because you know that you're more likely to get Akali 3, and you're not really considering like the remover and just playing your strongest board.
Right.
Okay, I think this is probably fine. I believe Gunblade is very good on casting in the stats, and also you kind of just want to take something early and not get stuck in the like rolling for something broken strategy. Also, I'm not sure if you realize that round does give interest.
I think I was just that my APM's not that high, so I was like, I needed to roll a little bit. I wasn't sure if I could roll through all my gold.
I think there's a lot of arguments for rolling there that makes sense to me. Like if your APM's not that good, or you think the other guy is going to take all the units out of the pool and you want to roll before him, I think those arguments are both completely fine. I will say if you're planning to do like this contested roll thing, you needed to roll a lot earlier than you're rolling now.
Okay.
Um, like you
Yeah,
should
that
roll
was what I was
very
gonna ask.
very
Mhm.
deep, like because like you think about the roll timings that you have in your head, and people get like overly attached to these roll timings for like not great reasons, right? Like people will roll on 4-2 or roll on 4-1, when in reality you can be rolling on 4-3, 4-2, 4-1 all of the turns, because um like the value of your rolls goes down a lot for all of the castings that are out of the pool, right? So if you
Mhm.
roll after him and say he just rolls to 0 and he hits 3 castings, like the value of the 90 gold that you're rolling is probably a lot less than the interest that you would have, like the gold value that you lose is less than the interest that you're gaining by staying so high up in gold. And
Mhm.
generally contested, you need to roll deeper earlier, and it's like it's not really that coin flippy, but it like feels bad to play, especially when you miss. It feels really terrible to play, but usually like when you're contested playing reroll, you want to be the guy who's rolling first. Um,
So how early would you be rolling? Like 4 5 here? Like even earlier?
well, the
Like would
main
you
thing
go
about it
all
is
in?
you're like 90 gold on 4-2 or something, or like
Yeah.
70 or 80. You're like well above 50.
Yeah.
Like 80. You should roll pretty deep here, and this is another like sort of scouting question where you should be scouting to see like when he's rolling his gold or has rolled his gold. Basically, if he's 50 gold here, you should just be rolling like pretty much to 0. Depending on how many castings you hit, obviously. Like if you're 40 gold and you only hit 1 casting, maybe not rolling to 0, right? But if you're the
Mhm.
things, you have 5 castings, 80 gold. Like if you roll to 0 here, the odds of you hitting are probably pretty. Like you could put it in like the TFT roll down calculator, but I would assume they're like somewhere close to 50%. I would assume they're a little bit higher than 50, but uh, because I did run Sims and calculator like a while ago. I would have to go recheck, but they're probably like 55 margin of error of like 5 on each side, maybe. I'll just say that as like an estimate. The other thing is, if
Mhm.
you hit 8 castings, you're very willing to take casting off carousel.
Right.
Is another thing you kind of have to consider. Because you don't really care about item, you have Pandora's, and even if you didn't have Pandora's, obviously you just take casting 3 any item, right? Um,
Okay.
but yeah, at the very least, you should be digging deep here to see whether you can hit like the casting 3.
Mhm.
You also didn't scout the other guy, which is kind of a little bit where this problem comes in. Where like if you scout him and he has casting 3 already, you kind of just have to suck it up and like push levels. But yeah, I think majority of the time you want to not be 80 gold on 4-3. Like I would have preferred if you just rolled on 4-2 after you see your augments. Or
Okay.
if you're mentally committed already, you can also roll on 4-1, because the other person will probably be willing to wait for their augment as well. Um so if it's like in your head, you're like, oh, I don't care what augment I get here, I'm just gonna play for casting 3 no matter what. I think rolling on 4-1's completely fine. Obviously, you get punished by prismatic ticket, but um, I think the EV is probably higher.
Okay.
But I guess the general like heuristic takeaway would just be you should be more willing to roll you want to roll before your opponent rolls when you're playing contested comps. That's just like the easy heuristic. And also, if you want to run Sims yourself in like a TFT calculator and you start like taking out units that your imaginary opponent has, you can kind of see like exponentially how much more gold it takes to hit on average. And yeah, basically holding units hurts you a lot more than like the interest value that you gain. So
Okay. Okay. Cool. I gotta run soon, but maybe just talking about takeaways. Um, so stage two, really focusing on strongest board instead of making econ thresholds, especially if I'm practicing more of like this my own self analysis in stage two. Um, the other thing is what we just discussed around if I'm contested, rolling before my opponent rolls. But without that in mind, the safer play here would have actually just been to push levels instead of trying to contest, that would have probably, like, I think I ended up a seventh. Like if I had actually just used that gold to push levels and I can hit a Callista, then most likely I probably hopefully could have gotten like a fifth or sixth instead of a seventh,
Yeah.
with maybe some further upside from that, especially since I have the Rage Blade. So, and I could have gotten the Radiant Rage Blade if I had gone that route, which would have been pretty decent. Although I guess I lose some of the featherweight's value. Any other kind of big major takeaways I'm missing?
I guess to add on to like the pushing thing, that's kind of like I think that's mainly like a 3-2 decision. When you have like the cast in 2 and you see like whether he's committing or not, I think you kind of decide then like whether you want to push levels, because you already have that cast in 2, which is like the main part of your board. You can roll a little bit to stabilize, but all of these reroll comps can usually push levels. I mean, Cog can't, but generally like the most of the rerolls can push levels and sort of play for like your different outs. And yeah, like your spot was very good to play Callista as well. Just because you have a Castin on your board doesn't really mean you have to play Castin, right? So I think like you maybe mentally committed a bit too hard to a line that's like very, very bad while contested. I'm not sure how much of that is like, this is, you have to self-assess this. Like, I'm not sure how much of that is kind of like tilt and like tilted that someone is contesting you, or that like you actually think like you're just going to hit anyways, or you think like the line, like your spot here is so good that you should just play contested. But I think it's very, very hard to do this. You kind of have to try and detach yourself from like what has already happened and try and think about how to maximize your placement now, and just like realize that if you're stuck cast in 2, this game's always like a bot 2 or bot 3, versus your spot is actually very good on stage 3. Like you should have probably 5 streaked and like 8 streaked to this stage maybe, and then in which case you can probably easily pilot this to a top 4 if you're like 8 streak here, level 7, 60 gold, right, with a Radiant Rage Blade. So I would say you kind of have to be, when you're looking at like your line, it's a lot easier to do it earlier into the game, rather than later, because like at this point the game is already very hard, assuming you don't roll a 0 here and hit cast in 3. Like like once someone kind of commits, 3-2 is usually like the point where you can kind of tell whether people are going to commit to reroll or not, because like if they roll a lot of gold, they're kind of committed, and then you have to decide, is your spot good enough to play the same comp as them, and then or is it not, and you feel like pushing is a better option. So that would also be like kind of an easy heuristic to use. That's not perfect obviously, but generally like 3-2 is when the easiest time to tell when someone's committed to a reroll or not, because that's the rolling interval people tend to use.
Okay, sounds good. This is super helpful. I appreciate you taking the time.
Yep. It was fun, even though we went a little bit over time, but nothing else. So it all ended up well. I would just say like final word is literally, it's just like a lot of it just comes down to like your stage 2. Again, like this game could have probably been completely avoided if you played stage 2 a little bit better. Obviously, you hit a cast in 2, so maybe not. But like if you didn't naturally cast in 2, right, and you're playing like a more normal stage 2, it probably leads you in a non-contested cast in direction. Although I don't think he should have contested you this game. Sometimes there's not much you can do about that, and I think from this game it's mainly we'll just focus on your stage 2 again, and kind of trying to review your own games as critically and try and fix your mistakes through there. And I think that's the easiest way and probably like the biggest leak I see in your game right now.
Okay.